Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you're listening to the Career Pathways Podcast. Today, we are joined by Dr. Wesley Beal. Hello, Wesley.
Hello, great to be with you.
And as always, behind the board, making the magic happen, is producer Jayson. Say hello, producer Jayson.
Hello, producer Jayson.
He's out there. He's just doing his thing, as always. And you'll be hearing his melodious voice sometime during this podcast because he has some questions to ask Dr. Beal. He's got some issues.
I got some questions.
I have some questions. I want some answers. Yes, he does. All right. Well, that's a great way to start. So, first question, Wesley, just to kick things off, can you kind of tell us about yourself, kind of where you're from, where you went to school, and kind of all the roads that eventually led you here to Lyon?
Yeah, okay. Glad to be here and support the work that you're doing in career services. I know it's a lot and very meaningful to the college, all
Thank
this
you.
work, and I hope that, always want to return the favor to you that you're doing for us. My name's Wesley. I've taught at Lyon. This is my 14th year.
Yep.
I am an Arkansan, not by birth. I was born in North Carolina when my dad was in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
They were Arkansans and came back to Arkansas promptly. My dad was a minister. We moved around, and Methodist itinerant. So we lived in a few different towns. I graduated from high school in Conway.
Yep.
Have family ties to Batesville specifically in the late 60s. My dad, his father also an itinerant Methodist, lived in Batesville at Central Avenue, working at Central Avenue. And they lived here again in the 80s and 90s when not with my dad, but my grandparents were here when I was living in Mountain View. So I spent time around Batesville as a kid. When we would come here to the swimming pool because there was no pool in Mountain View at all, except a few private pools.
Now, was it called the Cement Pond back then?
It was a fully functional swimming pool. For me, at the age of 7 years old, it was like a very special place to be.
All right.
That's all I knew. And then sometimes my dad would take me to the McDonald's,
Yep.
which this was before it had the NASCAR, or now erstwhile NASCAR decoration. But we didn't have a McDonald's in Mountain View either, so that was like a huge deal. It was like to get pancakes from McDonald's. Man, that's great. I went to Hendrix, another liberal arts college, studied English there, and did the liberal arts, breadth of study, ecology kind of stuff. And went to the University of Florida for grad school. At the time, it was the fourth largest university in America by population, 48,000 students. A shock in the first couple of weeks how big that place was.
Yeah.
Came back to Lyon right after that. So 14 years with one sabbatical semester off. Then I was a Fulbright U.S. scholar in Hong Kong for that semester.
Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Studying what?
English, man. It was wild. This is like a university I would never have been admitted to as a student. It's like a top 50 world university.
Oh.
And a faculty that would never have opened an application for me for a job there. And yet I wound up teaching two classes and enjoying like the Pearl River Delta. It was amazing.
Going back, itinerant Methodist. I'm not familiar with that term.
Itinerant, not exactly migrant, but Methodist ministers are organized by a conference, and it's a much more hands-on administration than many other Protestant churches. So Methodist ministers are assigned and reassigned. At the time, it was this was the 80s and 90s. It was commonly understood to be like a 6-year window. So if you made it 5 years at one church, you start packing up because they're going to move you to another place.
Yeah.
And that's because of like labor shortages and like a more easygoing kind of work ethos that's loosened up on the 6 years, and people are much more relaxed about it now, but people still get moved around. I actually think this is a good thing, maybe not for families
Right.
in all situations. But
Yeah.
I kind of wish that colleges could have a similar kind of thing to cross pollinate people.
And move it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, here 10 years, you need to go someplace else and learn from some other people and
Yeah.
share with them what you brought to
New
your
people,
former
new
place.
experiences, just
Yeah.
let's see where it goes.
Because it does, and it also has this among Methodists a pretty. I mean, it's like a 2-term limit on the presidency.
Yeah.
You cannot accumulate an undue amount of power
Yeah.
over a congregation because it's kind of understood that things are going to bounce about.
Wow. English.
Yeah.
Oh no. I was.
Or that.
Yeah. No. But English. As far as you've been in English, like as focused on English throughout your academic career. You're an English major.
Yeah.
Why did you choose English?
Well, at a liberal arts college, you don't have to have a good reason.
Yeah.
Which is a way of me saying I didn't have a good reason. It's I wanted to be a college professor. Why English and not some other things? Like I started I considered myself a double major when I came in as an undergraduate, and kind of quickly fell out of favor or lost interest in one of these other majors I had in mind, which I won't name publicly, but it does start with a P and rhymes with mycology, right? It was a pathway to have this like super naive thing, which is like an intellectual life for itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you could actually have that and with benefits,
right.
You know what I mean? And, make the ends meet.
So English is a broad area. So do you have a particular area of focus?
Right. So, that kind of slides a little bit over time. Like when I graduated from Florida, I had a very tight focus on the American modernism period. And that's roughly, you can slice it in a couple different ways. Mostly it's between the two world wars.
Mm-hmm.
You might say it's from 1900 to 1950, something like that. Thinking about the most experimental fiction and poetry of the time, the stuff that we'd associate with the experimental paintings of like the Picasso era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm to think about how, excuse me, to think about how, fiction of that time operated in a period that was also not just interesting artistic work, but a period that's full of tumult and interest. And, at the time that seemed, I was like in my 20s, and it seemed so interesting to live in interesting times. And now we do, and it kind of stinks.
Yeah.
It's like,
let's go back to being boring.
Yeah, let's go back to the boring 90s. Like that was great. When you can imagine somebody else's upheaval as like an ideal. So anyway, so that was like a first project, and still pretty passionate about some of that, but also have expanded over the last 10 years into a different kind of genre project, which is more about 20th and 21st century material. And, so kind of sliding, mostly American, mostly 20th and 21st century. At a research university, English faculty would be like super specific.
Yeah.
Super specific. I study this one author and like, not a lot of room for much else. Or I study this one very, very narrow period of, the late 1930s, family saga from the Depression era, and there's a
love story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like, what's interesting about that is that's how like knowledge gets produced, because you can't really learn something without throwing your whole life into it that way. But
we can't, at a college like Lyon, you need to be more of call it a generalist in terms of
for sure.
approach.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And also like I think I don't want to be so constrained as what they do at the big research universities. Not that anybody's ever asked me to do that anyway, but that's not really my ideal.
Yeah. Liberal arts, just in general, it's like, that you always, I'll call it that it's under siege. It's like, and, I'm just from a career services perspective, what's interesting is that you come from the outside business world, and it's almost that the sentiment is to turn college into a trade school.
Yeah.
That you're here to get skills, to get a job, a high paying job and career. And and all of a sudden, all this other stuff gets left behind. It's like, oh no, you can't be an English major. You can't be an anthropology major.
Yeah.
Philosophy. Well, just start today at Starbucks.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to go. And when I came in here, all of a sudden now you really see just that the world can. There's a whole lot of opportunity, and the world's so much bigger for liberal arts, and that it's not it's not just people that have computer science and business degrees that are going to do well. I mean, so long-winded way of kind of getting around. Yeah. Stay with me here.
Yeah, I'm
stay with me.
I'm here.
Don't leave me. But as far as that, how do you see kind of the state of liberal arts today, and kind of what's Lion doing to kind of make that relevant? Show give students a reason to major in English. What are your thoughts?
There are lots. So let's maybe try to call me back on the trail of when I start to meander here. I would say a couple of things. Like, one, I think it's true that historically, liberal arts has probably always been under some measure of siege.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a flippant. That's like the classic humanities thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Pat, if you look back far enough, it's the same story as ever, right? Which is trite and kind of not constructive. But if you go back to like some of the very foundational Greek thinkers, what's going on around Plato's time when he's talking about Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
Socrates, sometimes his mentor, he's trying to like pump up this kind of father figure. Sometimes he's using Socrates as a mouthpiece for what he wants to say, and Socrates is like not a real person here. What's going on around that? So while Plato and Socrates are talking about values of questioning for questioning's sake, people around them are thinking, well, the whole point of this tradition, the liberal arts tradition, is to deliver content, and this is the content. Here it is, it's written down, and how dare this man come around and start asking questions, right? As if that's the whole purpose of the enterprise, is the questioning. So like even in that moment, which we kind of crystallize as like a founding moment of, this model of thinking, it's pretty fraught.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They killed off Socrates, not by accident, very deliberately.
Yeah.
They had a chance to let him go. They kind of had a hung jury once and then decided, no, seriously, let's get rid of this guy. In Greek plays, he's sometimes represented as a distraction from like the real serious work of learning the set texts. Right.
Yep.
So always kind of tense.
Yeah.
That's a good sign, if anything, because it means that what we're doing on here, people care about enough to be bothered by. Not that one wants to bother for the sake of bothering, but if what we do here people take no notice of, that may mean that the value of the enterprise is quite low, right? That's trying to make a positive out of like that situation. Your other, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The other thing, I'm just like, I don't mean to talk over you, right? But you're talking about, how the kind of loose, rough description of how industry might look at liberal arts training versus, say, a vocational training. I think there are two ways of thinking about that. One, if you move to like the kind of vanguard industries, and those are like the Silicon Valley, which are they have their own issues, right? But that sector is very interested in critical thinking and people finding unique paths and not being, set into a mold to create whatever has been set before them, right? On the other hand, if and when people, and this is a hard conversation, right? Because we don't want students to like ignore the material reality that they've got to have jobs to pay the bills, right? But when someone is indicating that what they want is someone who's vocationally trained, that what they want is someone to fill a set need, that may correspond to, my potential, salary at some point or wages, right? But really that's what that person wants.
Right.
And maybe there's an agenda in that doesn't really consider another individual's like fullness and growth and, opportunities for, mobility and these kind of questions, right?
Yeah. And at the core of that, you mentioned critical thinking several times. Is that kind of one of the key things through liberal arts education that we're trying to foster within our students?
I would say so, but I think also big universities, research
Yeah.
universities would say that. University of
Yeah.
Florida would say that, and
Yeah.
they're not a liberal arts college, right? So I think that's, I mean, like, well, it's one of those values where everybody says they have it. So
Right.
therefore, what is it really? I mean, I think one thing in one kind of practical aspect of like what a liberal arts college is, we talk about it like it's breadth, and that's true. Students have
Right.
to take more different kinds of things here than they do at other bigger universities. That's true. The majors tend to be smaller in credit hours
Mhm.
here than they would be at big universities.
Right.
Those are observable. But the kind of skills that come out of a liberal arts experience are different from the major based, content based, disciplinary based
Right.
information or command that students come with
Right.
from research universities. Our students come out, we hope they come out with refined communication skills,
Right.
critical thinking skills,
How do you-
adaptability.
How do you
You know?
teach critical thinking? Because I just see it in the classroom. I try through questions. I try through case studies, and so you have some students that naturally are gifted, and they see exactly where where this is going. Others, it's kind of an extraction process almost.
Sure.
How do you teach critical thinking?
Oh, I mean, I think I don't think that I'm super inventive in it.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the ways that we do is kind of like through a reinforcement of a couple of questions, probably like what you're referring to
Right.
in your classes. Probably Jason's familiar with versions of these, but when you just ask students to unpack things.
Right.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What reason is there to believe that?
Yeah.
And what reason is there to believe that? And this is the Socratic stuff that like
Right.
digs
Just
down to the point
keeps
where
going.
you have to like continually reformulate, or rather defend, and if you can't, reformulate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kind of thinking that's not just this is how it is because I read it on page so and so in the
Right.
breakout box of that textbook, where
Yeah.
this is like knowledge that I can just regurgitate.
Yeah.
But it's knowledge that I can think about and manipulate. All people from all walks of life can do that, right? Students from Lyon College, students who don't go to college, students from whatever Big Ten university, right? But we really make that a point of emphasis.
Right.
And if you look at like the most desirable skills on, say, LinkedIn or
Mhm.
on what is it, the Georgetown University Center for Education and the Workforce? Do you know what I'm?
Okay.
If one were to Google those words, they would come to the right place.
Yeah.
I think the leader of that is the guy named Carnival. They find over and over again, what are the skills that employers want most?
Yeah.
It's not a certificate in
Right.
this or that technical training. It's communication skills,
Exactly.
adaptability, leadership. And why is that? It's actually not that the certificates don't matter. It's that that's assumed as a baseline for anybody who's going to be considered for that job.
Right.
And I know you know this. I'm just speaking to the microphone, not to you now. But
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what separates the person who gets the job is that from the other people who have the same certificate is that person can think through the material,
Right.
can adapt with new situations.
They're excellent communicators, and then you get into the workspace, and everything isn't predictable. Everything,
Yeah.
you deal with gray, very rarely black and white, and that's the critical thinker
Yeah.
that can break down an issue,
Yeah.
kind of think through options,
Yeah.
and evaluate each option to arrive at, whatever the best course of action based on the information. And
Well, if
go
it's a
from
job
there.
that someone's
Yeah.
going to get paid to do
Yeah.
with real
Yeah.
dollars,
Yeah.
there's going to be some of that human element. And that's like, I think we all agree. We don't know what's going to happen in 15 years, but like we expect there's going to be more reliance on that kind of human work.
Yeah.
And there's great likelihood of a sharp dividing line between the people who can do that and thrive and the people who cannot. And,
Yeah.
what does a marketplace mean for those people? It may be hard.
Uh,
Oh, can I ask a question?
no, Jason, you
Oh, I'm
cannot.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
of course, fire away.
Going off that.
Fire away.
Going back to we're talking about like future. So like currently we're kind of, at least I've seen, like, with the English and humanities at, like, the level, we're starting to see somewhat of a downward trend in the area. I was wondering, how do you feel about, like, this downward trend in, like, English majors and humanities at the collegiate level? Why do you think they're decreasing time?
Yeah, I think you could. I think you can think about different quantifiable measures will come up with slightly. I mean, I'm not disputing the claim. Different measures come up with slightly different takes on what those declines look like, but like the trend line is the same. What are some reasons for that? One, increasingly, there's a transactional understanding of what a college degree is for. It is for a job, and like everybody here agrees with that, but some majors are more ready-made for those kinds of jobs that are just like automatic, like through line to the next thing, right? English doesn't translate or communicate that as well as it could, for instance. I think it's also true that students who come to college have less experience with reading than they would have, say, a generation ago. And that makes the ask less comfortable to spend time doing this thing that you're not as comfortable doing. So there's kind of a, there's like the public discourse around humanities majors is sometimes antagonistic, but also like the fact is students aren't really set up to succeed in those ways. I mean, they can, but like they may not feel comfortable walking into that classroom, signing up for it. They don't see necessarily from past experience what the virtue might be.
Yeah, because like I know a lot of the arguments. Oh, like why would I even? Because like most people like throughout high school, I think this is probably them. Like people in high school, they don't like classes because it's taught. It's all very based, like grammar and language. And then people like nowadays are like, oh, I can have AI just fix all that stuff. Google does word check, so why would I need it? Do you think that is the big reason why people are reading less and doing less in that area?
Oh, well, I mean, I get the AI argument, and there's some practical application for that, by the way, right? That some of these, I mean, already, and who knows what they're going to look like in 15 years, 20 years, but they're already making meaningful differences in the way that people work, right? And that's not inherently bad. I do think that students who, just to kind of like take a quite slight little detour, students who rely solely on AI are to write a paper, they may not yet have the attunement of their judgment to know what that writing actually looks like. That it actually looks, for someone who's seen quality writing and less quality writing, it looks fairly junky, oftentimes. So like, I mean, think about any time that you've gone to like a restaurant where it's like a brand new kind of restaurant, like you go to like a Nepalese restaurant for the first time and you're like, this is the best ever. But someone who's been around these kind of restaurants, like you have no idea what you're talking about here. You know what I mean? Like I've had those experiences too. So with writing, people really do need to have some sense of the dexterity with language if they're going to become good communicators. And if they want to take the shortcuts and the off ramps, they are taking shortcuts away from those communication skills that people are going to be looking for after commencement day.
Oh.
Right.
What about like something like Grammarly? Is that an enabler or a crutch or from learning like how to write well?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think you still have to have so there are different kind of Grammarly applications.
Right.
One, it can do just like a grammar checker, and it can tell you where you've got misspellings.
Right.
Who doesn't use like a spell checker?
Spell check, right.
Good Lord. Like,
but
what an easy asset to make use of, right?
The title of this podcast doesn't work.
Yeah.
Clearly this guy does not
need grammar.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, yeah, who doesn't use like a spell check, man?
Yeah.
Like, life is too short to go like letter by letter to make. I mean, like, I would rather not have to use spell check. Like, I'd rather not see like more squigglies than not. And they're like, come on, like it's totally fine.
Yeah.
I do think that so Grammarly can do those other kinds of services where they're they'll I haven't used this, but my stepsister used an extension for her email. It's a Grammarly product.
Yeah.
and she says it can help you change the language. It'll give you these like prompts.
Right.
Well, have you used this?
Oh yeah, I live by it.
So like, what are the prompts that it gives you then?
It'll get tone. If it be more
What's an example?
positive,
Yeah, there is.
more optimistic. Just
Exactly.
and
she said like at one point like,
Yeah.
do you want it to be more assertive?
yeah, and I tend to be, I still do a lot of please and everything.
Sure.
And would you? And it'll come back actually trying to get me to be more assertive, but the tone, at least what I knowing the person I'm writing to is wrong.
Well,
So
no, but that's
yeah.
where the language comes in. That's where the
Right.
sensitivity comes
Yeah.
in, right? Like if you want to use the extension, dude, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
but you're the one who signs your name to it when it goes out.
Well, that,
And if you
yeah.
chose something that was assertive that shouldn't be, or that's so positive that it's like schmaltzy, well, that's on you. And that's where the sensitivity comes in.
And in business, I before coming here, I'd written up to 400 blogs, and when I started out, I thought I was just this like fountain of creativity, and I'm knocking out all this great content. And then I'd have people call me up and go, Pat, did you read your blog before you put it on LinkedIn? And I realized right away, okay, yeah, I have to have something to slow myself down, and that paid API of Grammarly really did kind of help, because it was like your brain gets going too fast, so you're missing, like you're forgetting words to even include
Sure.
in all
Well,
this.
the other thing that's like super, this is kind of like a response to your question,
Yeah.
Jayson. That's like, this is really, I don't mean this in a patronizing way. It's too abstract for you to understand, but it's like, you'll get this, but it's like, it's hard to make this sell to a student who's about to maybe take a shortcut. Why would they make a shortcut? Because they're pressed for time.
Right.
And what's the value difference between these two options? Well, to do the writing is really not just learning the tone and
Right.
making sure that if I think this tone is compatible with this message and this speaker, but also it's like you got to figure out how to do some of the thinking. Yesterday we had a workshop in my composition class.
Mm-hmm.
Student came to me today for an office hour appointment, and we were talking about finding some research material for it. And she said, and this is totally fine.
Yeah.
She said, well, it wasn't really until yesterday during the workshop that I figured out what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay.
And this is, by the way, this is a great problem because it means she's actually like worked her way to a real thought
Mm-hmm.
that is really hers.
Yeah.
And, is this a thing that she's a first year college student?
Right.
Is this something that she's going to remember 15 years from now whenever she's got whatever she's got going on in her life? I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah.
It's not going to define who she is. But that skill to be able to think through a problem, if she had just hit the prompt on ChatGPT, she would
Right.
never develop that skill.
Yeah.
And the lack of communication, the lack of depth of thought just goes right
Mhm.
through the portal right there,
Yeah.
And I don't think AI is necessarily either, because like there's Google's working on an AI which I've tried to experiment with. It's still kind of clunky, but I'm sure in like 5 years, right? But like it's like a tone. It because AI learns
Yeah.
off of what you do. So like if you're wanting to write, like let's say a novel, you're trying to write a character who more informal language, the AI will actually know like when it's going to detect when to not do the squigglies.
Sure.
For if you
Oh,
want to
because
write
it
in a
knows
certain
in
way.
like dialect or something.
Yeah, like it's learning dialect. So,
Right.
like, I think that was a good application, because I see all these people saying like, "Oh, let's just burn AI, ban it." I think they're kind of missing the point.
Well, it can also help you speed along to some resources, and I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff it can do. More than I know, by the way.
Yeah.
It speeds
Right.
up the creative process 10 times. You don't have to go back and every little. It kind of helps you as you go. So
Could. But again, as with the
Yeah.
Grammarly, you've got to know like what is an assertive tone, and
Yeah.
is this too much? Because there is like a kind of assertive tone
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Where were you before Atlanta? Remind me.
What? Where was I? I was
Living.
in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I don't really know what it's like in like Northern Ohio, but I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking you lived in New England at some point. Your daughter does, right?
Yeah, Vermont.
Yeah. Well, I imagine assertive there and assertive in Atlanta are like
Yeah.
not comparable.
Oh yeah, yeah. Atlanta's, just a lot of please,
Yeah.
thank yous, and everything.
And
So,
would you mind?
would you mind? Yeah.
And
Bless your heart.
that's assertive in a certain way. But like,
Yeah.
but I mean, like that tone, like you got to like learn some of these discourses to connect.
Yeah, yeah.
And that I do worry a little bit about the the discernment of a generation to be sensitive to that language if they're not practicing it as much.
Well, that's and that's kind of like kind of leads to kind of where do you see our like core curriculum evolving over time? Because it's not like it can stay the same, and so now you got this new student, you got this new age. Where is it all? Do you see this thing going? Like,
wow, Pat, man, there's like a total broadside there. You said you weren't going to do this before we started. You said this was a joke.
No,
okay.
This isn't the controversy.
No,
but,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a hard time, and also buying myself a beat to figure out. So I'm not speaking for myself or for the core curriculum committee in a formal way.
No, this is your opinion.
But like, what is the purpose of a liberal arts curriculum generally in America over time? I think that we can see two different kinds of trends that'll emerge. And I think that over time, we can see a kind of pendulum swing looking at the kind of what some people might call like the relativism of AI, where like facts don't matter and we just all kind of make it up as we go along.
Right.
Looking at that scene, which we expect to like proliferate, maybe there'll be more interest in a hard and fast set liberal arts curriculum.
But
I think
the educated citizen, some knowledge of
sure.
world history, just kind of everything, philosophy, English.
Well, but I mean, I think that another way of thinking about it is a way that they're like this is kind of percolating in some of the things you read about on like the AACU does a lot of surveys of this kind of stuff, American Association of College of Universities. And for them, it's more of a shift towards skills building and not vocational skills, but like more of a demonstration of here are your communication skills. Show me where you pick those up.
Right.
Here are your problem solving skills, whatever they are, from whatever discipline, whether it's an econ class or a studio art class. Show us how you're learning to be a problem solver. And so like the onus is a little bit more, it's a little different from the way that these curricula have looked, which is like a set menu of things to choose from. And now it's more about skills and experiences that accumulate. And
and that core curriculum, I guess, the world's going to just become more integrated with technology. So somewhere those are just going to become further and further integrated in one form or another.
I mean, the calculator is like the standard analogy that people use, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's scandalized by calculators in math classes anymore. You know what I mean?
Jayson swears by an abacus, but that's a whole other thing.
I was wondering what that was.
That's another podcast.
I was wondering what that was in the corner. Kind of weird. So, I mean, one would expect.
Yeah.
And also a better sense of like what to do with it. I mean, I think a calculator, everybody always knew what to do with it. I guess maybe that's not true. Who knows? But like with AI, it's like, well, what is the optimal usage of this technology?
Yeah.
Where does there begin to be a declining return on that?
Right.
I don't think we know that. And I bet that over time we'll get a better sense of it.
Our honors fellows program. Now, are you the head? Is that the correct way of phrasing the head of our honors fellows?
Sure, you can call me what you want to call me. Director is the title on an
director
email signature.
Okay, and what exact is it? Is it like our version of an honors college, or can you explain kind of what our honors fellows program is?
Other big universities have honors colleges that are very they're segregated from the rest of the university. Like the housing's more or less fully separate, so a lot of the curriculum is separate.
Right.
Ours is integrated. So like if you have a psych major, you graduate with the psych majors, whether you're an honors fellow or not. You take coursework with the psych department.
Right.
What we do is we try to incentivize different kinds of high impact learning practices that I think the college would like to try to scale out all the way across, but it's kind of labor intensive and not everybody's all the time wanting to do this.
Yeah.
Student wise. So we incentivize students to go into research experiences. You were referring to one who's interviewing next week at a major university in California.
Right.
She's done two or three different research experiences off of our campus over summertime. She probably would have done that on her own, but we have these like mechanisms to kind of
connect her with opportunities.
To do this kind of stuff. You've come to some of these talks and connected students to those exact things and internships. We have a capstone that's really the only course that they take differently from their from the rest of the catalog.
Right.
And the capstone, Dr. Paul Buby was the first to teach it. Now Dr. Lexi Baldacci teaches it. It's an exercise in communication skills because we have students from all kinds of majors. Any senior honors fellow takes it or can take it. And what they do in that class, I think, is pretty neat. They learn to translate their disciplinary research for a public audience.
Oh, okay.
Right. So whereas, if you're a chemistry student, what's your major, Jayson? Oh, no kidding. Why have we not met yet? There'll be a certain point when
wanted to take your detective
I'm not
literature.
that was a judgment. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I wanted to take your detective literature, but you can blame Martel. Martel, because I have to take French and I wanted to do the creative writing workshop.
I'm not worried about it. It's great. There'll be a certain point when you're like at the senior level doing some technical niche-y thing for an English professor, and that'll satisfy the English major, but it won't really correspond or translate to like man on the street. What is this for? And that's also true of our STEM students, our social science students. It's just the nature of the academy that things kind of become very insular.
Right.
And this class is giving them tools on how to communicate more broadly about what the core values of that exercise might be and why it matters.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
You're on a podcast, but you've done podcasts, your own podcast, right?
You were there for some of that, yeah.
And and also, I seem to recall that was there like interviews or podcasts through the honors?
That's what so the capstone eventuates into like podcasts. They're not, sometimes they're interviews, sometimes they're monologues, but they produce this. Yeah. This is on our website, the Lion-Fellows page of lion.edu.
And then, so that's kind of the capstone experience. They get to just speak on a subject that they, whatever it is of their choice.
And they spend some time dissecting like what makes good public engagement.
Yeah.
Right. So they spend some time before they worry about the stuff that Jayson's doing, the production side. They do learn some of that, right? But before they get to that, they learn, how to. They find some podcast that they find successful for whatever reason. I mean, not just like the Kelsey brothers, but like a podcast about, I don't know, whatever. You can find examples are myriad, right? But like they'll figure out like, well, how is this person trying to translate big ideas for like a fairly easily consumed 25-minute run?
Yeah.
Right. Where might this person where are they making some strategic decisions? Like they spend some time like dissecting it before they sit down and do it themselves.
Oh, I've had, and then your own podcast, Lax, is that? Of course. Yeah. I got to laugh,
when you say it that way. Yeah. Never thought. LAX is
LAX, yeah.
Prefer it.
Yeah, okay.
That's on SoundCloud, and I know that you were part of that orientation series.
Yes. Yeah. And you've run it now.
Second year.
Okay. And the purpose of creating the LAX podcast was what?
To orient new colleagues to the college to cultures of the liberal arts, which are, we started talking about this in the front end.
Right.
It's a little bit antagonized in the public. A lot of, I'm going to blank on the number of the college graduates in America. And obviously, for starters, like around a third of Americans have a college degree in the first place.
Okay.
Of those,
is that low?
I think it is.
Goodness. Okay.
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
But of those who have the college degree, like it's single digits who have a liberal arts college degree.
Right.
Not a liberal arts major degree from a big university, but a liberal arts college degree. So the chances of someone coming to Lyon College who have liberal arts backgrounds quite low. So how do we sustain a culture of this place operating within its own traditions? Like that's what that series is about.
Oh, well, you're an author, and you brought to your books. So can you tell us about?
I did. You were quizzing me about my footnotes a minute ago. about San Francisco State, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Would you like me to do a reading?
Yeah.
Probably not that page.
A reading
Um,
by Wesley Beal.
So this book, the cricket. That's right.
We have a crickets on the soundboard.
I mean, be
Your choice. Your choice, Jayson. Your choice.
Don't be stingy with that, because I know it deserves it. This is
I've never used it before in a recording.
So, but your first book was what?
that was the really niche-y American modernism book.
Okay.
Very much like the kinds of authors that, they're more obscure. They're doing like formal work that's more like James Joyce and Faulkner than
Right.
conventional narrative storytelling, this kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
Avant-garde types more often than not. And this one is called Campus Fictions. It's a study of the American academic novel, campus novel.
Okay. You'll need to explain that.
Well, I mean, so novels set at university, right? During whether featuring faculty or staff protagonists or student protagonists.
So like a dashing director of career services. Okay, there's our
this
main
is
character.
Good. This is good. This is good.
So-
now let's unfold that. What happens? What happens next? Because there's got to be some kind of motivating scandal of some sort.
Okay, let's change that subject. Next subject, please.
This becomes much less funny when you start to like.
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, then we'll have a ne'er-do-well professor of English.
Yeah. Well, those are like cliche at this point. So it studies some of the kind of conventions of the genre, and also the kind of like it's kind of built for a somewhat general audience. So it's got kind of thematic chapters, rather than like one really deep dive on one singular subject, right?
Have you seen the movie The Holdovers yet?
No, I've not.
Paul Giamatti. Yeah, have you, Jayson?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a guy. I know I can't remember. He's a college professor. No, he's not it's an elite boys boarding school, and he's a teacher, and it's just, but he's got his issues, and you find out through the movie all the problems he has, and it's a coming of age, with him and a student, so it's
coming
it's kind
of
a
age
campus
stories, and also kind of associated with coming of age stuff, associated with lots of these revolve around pretty gnarly midlife crises.
Right. And there's some of that with there, and then and I guess getting back to the dashing career services director, that it ends with me on the desk yelling "Carpe diem." Is that? Can we flash forward to that?
You just want to get past the part that you don't want to get into, right? The scandal part.
Yeah, the scandal part.
I'm trying to imagine. I guess we're not going to talk about it, but we're just gonna. I'll give you some crickets in a second. Like let's think about what is the scandal that would be like the defining plot motivator for the dashing career services.
He cared too much.
No, but what does he do with that? He cares so much that he. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. We're gonna get deep and dark, and I somehow got past the interviews and everything and the background check, and so I got to leave it at this. Now all of a sudden people are gonna start researching Pat Lynch.
Well,
and all trouble's gonna come. So, I get you. No, all right. Dramatic change of subject. All right.
Okay.
We're going to go to what I'm going to consider a little bit of the obscure.
Okay.
All right. You are the former president of the John Dos Passos Society. Could you tell us a little about that organization?
John Dos Passos was on the cover of Time magazine. It's not obscure. Give me a heartbreak.
Illuminati? Is that...
What? Say it again?
No.
What are we talking about?
I don't know anything about John Dos Passos.
In fairness, so here, John Dos Passos is like one of those kind of labors of love.
Okay.
Author, super interesting person, also super interesting novelist. He was, most of his work is from let's call it 1925 to 45.
Right.
The stuff that people focus on, though he continues writing into the early Cold War period. Considered by his peers, and in fact was peers with Ernest Hemingway.
Okay.
right? Like they went to the Spanish Civil War together.
All right.
You know, rubbing elbows in those orbits, considered a peer by them, considered by his contemporaries one of the great literary lights of the era. And he's just, I mean, he still shows up in anthologies of American literature,
Right.
but he is not a byword for the American literary voice the way that Hemingway is,
Yeah.
or Faulkner, or Gertrude Stein, all
Right.
from the same period.
Mm-hmm.
What are some reasons for that? Well, you'll have to read my first book to find out. No, it's a joke. So he's interesting because as formally challenging as Faulkner, though a lot of people would find that as a virtue via challenge, like he's elevated or whatever. But the other thing that's super interesting is in the 20s and 30s, he was fairly left. And then by the middle 50s, he was fairly right. And I think that one of the things that happens is I think that he just personally alienates people in the literary establishment so that he doesn't get the name defining awards. Too left for some, too right for the others, and then, any chance of like whatever a Pulitzer Prize just goes down with that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Also, like with someone like Hemingway, he became kind of mythic in a way, lifestyle.
Well,
and
safari
everything.
stuff and all that.
Yeah. That.
That's true.
Yeah, that kind of enhanced, his notoriety.
Yeah. Dos Passos has his like magnum opus is the USA trilogy published during the 1930s. I think you might like to give this a try. It operates on this like 4-part narrative model. It tells the story of America from like more or less. I mean, what a crazy thing to say. Like the story of America, multiple protagonists spanning across class and race and geographic boundaries from like 1910 to about 1929. And it uses 4 different kinds of devices. It uses narrative, like fiction. He has newspaper cutouts where it's literally making collage poetry out of newspaper headlines and copy.
Yeah.
Some of it's very discordant.
Yeah.
Some of it's pretty fluid. Some of it's kind of personal memoir style kind of stuff, stream of consciousness kind of stuff. And some of it's profiles of, famous leading people, whether it's artists and dancers or steel captains of the steel industry. So he's like trying to capture all history in like this kind of like quadrangulation. It's a really neat project.
I'll read it as long as I don't have to write a paper.
Sure.
On it. All right.
Sure.
Yeah. But the society then, is it just people like-minded people like you that get together to just share?
Yeah.
The kind of just share an appreciation and.
Yeah. I mean, it's a national. I was the first president of that group. They meet again in May, so I haven't seen them since pre-COVID. Looking forward to seeing some of those people.
Wow. Okay.
It's mostly professors who work and teach with that kind of material, but it's open to anybody who wants to come. We've had, people. We've had what we call independent scholars, right? Come and visit. There are a lot of author societies associated in American literature, right? Henry James Society, Gertrude Stein Society or Association, and they can be a little bit. I mean, I feel if his reputation weren't so. If it didn't underdeliver so much, I would be maybe not super interested in single author societies, personally. But there's a kind of mission with him to evangelize a little bit about an undervalued author, right?
Yeah. Do you like right now? Do you write or journal, or how do you kind of I guess practice your craft? And kind of and just find a creative outlet.
That's a good question. So this kind of work is like very formal, and you kind of set down time to do it, right? Like on a work schedule. But I think it's. I mean, it's back to the question of AI, right? Like, depends on what you want writing to do. If you just
Right.
want it to be a memo that really is just a directive kind of thing, well, then whatever, use AI. But I also journal, like I think a lot of people do. And journaling is not to record for posterity, because honestly, who cares about
Right.
what I did for lunch yesterday or whatever?
Sure.
It's not to record it. It's to, like, for me to come to terms with something and to think about it more deeply, right? Or just maybe not to resolve it, but just to, like, put it down as an unresolved issue, right? And I mean, I do that.
Yeah. I find it's helpful for me for like affirmations, that, just or validation, probably a better way of saying it, that, kind of it's so easy to think all the things you didn't do, all the things you could have done better,
Sure.
versus, okay, what went right in this particular day? And it seemed, oh yeah, that's pretty easy, but
Well, I mean, but
it's not.
But again, well, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. You could probably
Yeah.
say, what went right today? Tell me. What's it like in a
Well,
couple of words?
Well, in a couple words, Wesley Beal podcast.
Wesley Beal showed up late to the podcast,
No,
but we still did it.
It's been a great
Um,
conversation.
So,
No,
I mean, so
but there was some great student. There's a thing sometimes where you question. Okay, I'm here to make our students successful. Did I have an impact today? I can say yes.
yes, of course you can.
And
But I mean,
yeah.
I think what I'm trying to say is you could have, if you just wanted to make a note of it,
Mm-hmm.
you could have AI. You could say, write a note to self regarding, progress on the career fair.
Right.
And it would. And
Yeah.
some of it would be false information, but you could go and prune that out and
Mhm.
put the right stuff in.
Yeah.
The contact at this place and the contact at that
Yeah.
place or whatever. But it's not you coming to terms with it. That's just a memo.
Right.
And if you're going to, I mean, I know that people who are, whatever, 30 and up are not over reliant on AI, but if we become over reliant on AI, we won't be able to have those kinds of,
Yeah. Exactly.
that kind of conceptual stuff becomes a harder hurdle to jump.
Yeah. No. But back to you, as far as like, do you have any like other creative outlets? I mean, I just English major, assume writing, but are there other things that you?
No, I
They
don't
do?
know, man. I walk my dog.
Rufus Thomas song or a
What?
obscure reference, a Stax?
That one
yeah.
slipped past me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rufus Thomas
You can
wrote a
stay
song.
with me.
I walk my dog.
Yeah. Oh, Walking the Dog. Famous single. 1967.
Okay. Well, I'm embarrassed. I should go learn
Was that
about this.
before or after?
Good
Well,
Lord.
obviously, it's that's when there was a full head of a gorgeous mane, but nowadays, well, another thing. That'll
A
be
Stax
part of
record.
that'll be part of my narrative, as far-
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
No, anything else?
Have raised 2 kids.
Yep.
One's 13, one's turns 8 in about 2 weeks. I wouldn't call children a hobby,
Oh,
but they do take up a lot of creative time, which is good,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
This is a podcast about careers. You're a faculty advisor for an English major, and now they're going into their senior year and wondering, what do I do with my English major? What advice would you give them?
The honest answer is I tell them to go talk to Pat Lynch.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean to say that because I'm here, but we say first things first. Go
Right.
talk to Pat about, setting down some boundaries on searches, maybe to get some keywords that I don't know about.
Right.
One of my jobs in that role, and this is like a super kind of like tough balance, is, I'm like a teacher scholar, and I don't mean to be standoffish about the world after Lion, but like, this is not my area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
But I do spend a lot of time talking to students about a couple of things. One, reminding them that their earnings are going to be on track with their peers.
Right.
Probably not in the very first gig, but the data indicate roughly 10 years out, they're doing as well as, and usually better than, students with vocational degrees. I emphasize a lot, like, look for the gigs that have communication,
Right. Exactly.
right? And you may not know where those are. And maybe I don't know today what you're going to look at in 2 years, Jayson, and that's fine. Some of those jobs may not exist. Some of them I've just never heard of. But those skills, you can wind up doing all kinds of things with these degrees. And to think that it just has to go into publishing, which is fine, but like there's a whole range of communication that is required in our society, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like just, I've been in marketing my whole life, and just having somebody that is an effective writer in terms of creating whatever it is, website content, emails, any kind of marketing message. You there's a certain there's people that have it, and then people that don't, and English majors, I've seen them succeed in that area. Just that one little subset
Sure.
alone. But
I mean, even
yeah.
in the areas where you assume that you need to have like a STEM degree in health
Right.
in health services,
Yes.
lots of community. I mean, obviously, you think health services, you think physician, you think biomajor, and that's
Yeah.
like one natural pathway. But health services also have lots of communication platforms,
Yeah.
right?
Chief chief operating officer over at White River. We've talked about that. Just about the hospitals more than just doctors, nurses, and public relations and community outreach and all these things about telling the great called Independence County, Greater Batesville area about what Stormont does. Is vital
Yeah.
to what they do just as much as delivering quality health care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, thinking, Jayson, is there anything else from you, sir?
Yeah, I guess this kind of goes off about like if you were to sell kind of English department, kind of a sales pitch type of way, like just really brief and short, like try to get people on board, what would you say?
Ooh, interesting. I would need some practice to get it short and punchy. First of all, you caught me off guard a little bit. I mean, the approach that I would take would be not to say that you need to be an English major, but that an English major enriches all other kinds of pursuits, right? If you want to be an English major, that's great. I would actually encourage you to have a double major while you're at it, right? To burnish these communication skills while also burnishing some other skill set that we may not provide for quite as much in my field, right? Why the English major? I mean, there's the communication business that's important to business, but also, I mean, there's this other piece of it, which is that, like you're a human being. You should think about things that interest you. And hopefully, I mean, I wouldn't presume that listen, man, like honestly, like I teach class. Some days you'll attend my class and it's not going to like really like, tickle your fancy or whatever, right? But generally, the English major and other humanities courses are there for human beings to think about human questions, not just a question that's going to get them remunerated at a certain rate in 5 or 10 years with benefits and all this.
Yeah.
And so you deserve that, right? You deserve to make time for that, and so does everybody else.
Well, that is a great way to end this conversation, Wesley.
Thanks,
Thank you. And
Thanks, Jayson.
all right, and thank you for listening to the Career Pathways podcast. We publish a new episode every Monday, and we always need that important fact. Producer Jayson, how extensive is the reach of the Career Pathways podcast as of today?
So as of today, you can find the podcast on about 99.97% of platforms. Same number, same percentage of bacteria that kids kill.
Wow.
There you go. And
Lethal.
Yes, it's truly lethal. So thank you again, and we'll and hope that you join us next week for another episode of the Career Pathways podcast.
This broadcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and by KILT Studios.